The North Sea churns violently under a slate-gray sky. Waves crash against the wooden hull of a longship as it cuts through the frigid waters. Bearded men grip their oars tightly, their breath forming clouds in the bitter air. Yet despite the freezing spray and howling winds, these Norse seafarers appear remarkably dry. This seemingly impossible feat, staying warm and protected against some of the harshest maritime conditions on Earth without modern materials, was one of the most crucial innovations that allowed Vikings to dominate the northern world for centuries. Before we begin this journey into the Viking Age, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? It's always fascinating to see our community of history lovers spread across the world. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications. Every subscription helps us keep exploring the real stories behind the legends. Now, let's begin. The story of Viking maritime dominance begins long before their infamous raids shocked the European coastlines. In the cold fjords and harsh landscapes of Scandinavia, survival itself demanded ingenious solutions. Here, in a world where winter dominated much of the year, Norse peoples developed extraordinary techniques to battle the elements, techniques that would eventually enable them to venture farther than any European mariners before them. The 8th century world that gave birth to the Viking Age was one of dramatic climate fluctuations. Archaeological evidence shows that a period of relatively mild conditions, what scholars call the medieval warm period, had begun to create population pressures in the Norse homelands. As the Scandinavian communities expanded, they looked outward, beyond their fjords and coastal settlements, but to venture into the open waters of the North Atlantic required more than just courage and navigational skill. It demanded practical solutions to the deadly challenge of exposure. Consider for a moment what it meant to sail in these northern waters. The average temperature of the North Sea in winter hovers just above freezing. Immersion in such water leads to hypothermia within minutes. Add to this the constant spray, freezing rain, and punishing winds, and the challenge becomes clear. Without effective protection, long-distance voyages would have been impossible. Death from exposure would have claimed even the hardiest warriors long before they reached distant shores. The Norse relationship with their harsh environment shaped every aspect of their material culture. The Vikings were not simply warriors. They were master craftspeople, engineers, and problem solvers. Their understanding of their native resources, animal products, plant fibers, and natural oils allowed them to develop a sophisticated system of weather protection that remains impressive even by today's standards. The maritime expertise of the Norse was not born in isolation. For generations before the Viking Age officially began with the Lindisfarne raid in 793 CE, coastal Scandinavian communities had been developing techniques for survival at sea. Fishing vessels ventured into dangerous waters year-round, creating a laboratory for practical innovation. These experiences, passed down through generations, formed a knowledge base that would later enable longer voyages of exploration and raiding. At the heart of Viking weather protection was wool, not just any wool, but a specific type produced by northern European sheep breeds. These animals had evolved over centuries to survive in harsh conditions, developing dual-layer fleeces with coarse outer fibers and a fine insulating undercoat. The Norsemen were expert shepherds, selectively breeding for these protective qualities. The resulting textile, known as vadmal in Old Norse, was the foundation of Viking weather protection. The significance of wool in Norse society cannot be overstated. The Icelandic sagas frequently mention vadmal as a unit of currency and a measure of wealth. This wasn't merely cloth, it was survival technology. Archaeological discoveries from Viking burial sites reveal intricately woven textiles with varying densities and weave patterns, suggesting specialized uses for different conditions. Garments recovered from preserved bodies in bogs show sophisticated construction techniques that maximize the natural properties of the wool. The weaving of vadmal was primarily women's work, and Norse women were held in high regard for this essential skill. The loom weights found in female graves indicate the cultural importance of textile production. Sagas speak of women whose skill in weaving was so renowned that their work was sought after throughout the Norse world. These skilled artisans understood how to vary the weave according to intended use, creating tighter, water-resistant fabrics for outer garments and softer, more insulating weaves for underlayers. What made Norse wool particularly effective was the presence of lanolin, a natural wax produced by sheep that coats their wool fibers. Unlike modern processed wool that has been stripped of its oils, Viking Age wool retained much of this lanolin through their processing methods. When wool with lanolin gets wet, it creates a reaction that actually generates heat. This chemical process would have been crucial for sailors repeatedly exposed to ocean spray. The Norse understanding of wool went beyond simply wearing it. They developed a process called fulling, beating and agitating woolen cloth in water, often mixed with materials like stale urine that contained ammonia, which helped tighten the fibers. The resulting fabric, similar to what we now call felt, created a densely compressed material that was remarkably water-resistant while maintaining its insulating properties. Experiments by modern historical reenactors have shown that properly prepared Norse wool can repel water for hours before becoming saturated. But wool alone wasn't the complete solution. The Viking layering system was sophisticated and adaptable. Contemporary sources and archaeological evidence suggest a three-layer approach: a linen undergarment to wick moisture away from the body, a middle insulating layer of wool, and an outer protective layer treated with various water-repelling substances. The production of linen for the inner layer was another specialized craft in Viking society. Flax cultivation required specific knowledge and careful processing. The resulting linen fabric was ideal for undergarments as it efficiently wicked moisture away from the skin. Archaeological findings from trading centers like Birka in Sweden have uncovered fine linen garments, often found alongside wool outer clothing, confirming this layering approach. This outer layer represented some of the most innovative aspects of Viking weatherproofing technology. The sagas speak of sea cloaks and weather garments treated with various preparations. Archaeological evidence and experimental archaeology have identified several substances the Vikings likely used to waterproof their outer garments. Among these was a mixture of animal fats, particularly from seals and whales, which were abundant resources in their coastal communities. A particularly effective treatment combined rendered animal fat with beeswax and pine tar, a substance the Vikings produced in large quantities for ship maintenance. This mixture, when worked into woolen fabric, created a remarkably effective barrier against water. Pine tar, with its natural antiseptic properties, had the added benefit of extending the life of the garment by deterring rot and pests. The production of pine tar was itself a specialized Norse industry. Archaeological excavations have uncovered tar production sites throughout Scandinavia. The process involved slowly heating pine wood in oxygen-poor conditions, collecting the resulting resinous tar. This substance was so valuable in medieval Northern Europe that it became a major export, with thousands of barrels shipped annually from Norse territories. While primarily used for ship maintenance, this abundant resource found its way into numerous aspects of Viking material culture, including their weather protection systems. The recovery of the Oseberg ship in Norway offered remarkable insights into Viking maritime technologies. Among the grave goods were fragments of what appeared to be specialized seafaring garments with evidence of waterproofing treatments. Analysis of these textiles revealed traces of animal fats, tree resins, and other substances consistent with waterproofing methods described in later medieval sources. Beyond wool, the Vikings utilized leather extensively for weather protection. Unlike modern tanned leathers, Viking Age leather was often brain-tanned, a process using animal brain tissue that creates a remarkably supple, water-resistant material. Archaeological finds from trading centers like Hedeby and Burka have yielded leather fragments that show evidence of various treatments with oils and fats to enhance their water-repellent qualities. The brain tanning process deserves special mention, as it represents a sophisticated understanding of biochemistry, developed through generations of practical experimentation. The natural compounds in animal brains contain emulsifying agents that penetrate leather fibers, coating them with water-repellent oils. Modern analysis has confirmed that this ancient technique produces leather with superior water resistance compared to many modern tanning methods. Experimental archaeologists who have recreated these processes report that brain-tanned leather maintains flexibility even after repeated wetting and drying cycles, a crucial quality for maritime use. The sagas also mention seal skin and the pelts of other marine mammals being used for particularly wet conditions. These naturally water-resistant materials were ideal for seafaring. The Greenland Norse particularly valued seal skin, with evidence suggesting they produced specialized sealskin garments for maritime activities. Modern analysis of preserved skin garments from the Arctic region confirms the exceptional water-resistant properties of properly prepared sealskin. Norse innovation extended to extremities, the parts of the body most vulnerable to cold and wetness. Mittens were preferred over gloves as they allowed fingers to share warmth. Archaeological finds have uncovered woolen mittens with leather palms, a practical design that provided both warmth and the grip needed for handling ropes and oars. For footwear, the Vikings used a combination of wool wrappings and leather shoes, often treated with the same waterproofing mixtures used for their outer garments. The Norse approach to footwear was particularly ingenious. Excavations at Viking settlements have uncovered leather shoes with complex seam structures designed to minimize water penetration. Rather than stitching directly through the leather, which would create holes for water to enter, Viking shoemakers used techniques that kept seams above the waterline. They also developed methods for treating leather soles with mixtures of oils, waxes, and resins that maintained flexibility while repelling moisture, crucial for maintaining traction on wet ship decks. Headwear was crucial for heat retention. The human body loses significant heat through the head when wet, so protecting this area was essential for survival. Wool caps, sometimes lined with fur for additional warmth, have been found in numerous Viking burial sites. These could be pulled low to protect the ears and neck, areas particularly vulnerable to frostbite. Some finds suggest specialized hood designs that could be worn under helmets, addressing the dual needs of warfare and weather protection. The archaeological record suggests that Viking mariners understood the principle of specialized gear for different conditions. The Bjerringhøj burial in Denmark contained multiple sets of clothing, including what appears to be specialized maritime wear. The find included woolen garments of various weights and weaves, suggesting seasonal adaptations. Similar patterns have been observed at other burial sites, indicating that Norse seafarers adjusted their clothing systems according to expected conditions, a sophisticated approach to environmental protection. The Viking approach to weather protection wasn't simply about survival, it was about maintaining functionality. Their activities required dexterity and freedom of movement, whether handling ships in rough seas or engaging in combat. Their clothing systems reflected this practical requirement, with garments designed to provide protection without restricting movement. This practical approach extended to their ship design. Viking longships incorporated raised platforms where crew members could sit, elevating them above the water that inevitably entered the open vessels. Archaeological evidence from shipwrecks shows drainage channels carved into these platforms, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of how to manage water within the vessel itself. The question of how Vikings managed during storms or particularly harsh conditions remains a subject of debate among historians. The sagas suggest that during the worst weather, crews would sometimes pull into sheltered bays and construct temporary shelters using the ship's sail and supporting structure. Excavations of Viking Age harbors have uncovered evidence of temporary landing sites along common routes, suggesting a network of known safe havens. For longer voyages, Viking ships carried portable shelters, tent-like structures that could be erected over sections of the vessel when anchored. These would have been constructed from the same waterproofed materials as their garments, creating dry spaces for rest and recovery. The Gokstad ship Discovery included wooden tent supports, confirming this practice. The Gokstad find revealed another ingenious aspect of Viking maritime culture: shipboard cooking facilities. The excavation uncovered a metal cooking box designed to contain fire safely aboard wooden vessels. This allowed crews to prepare hot food and beverages even in harsh conditions, an important consideration for maintaining body temperature. The sagas mention seafarers consuming hot broths and porridges while at sea, providing crucial internal warmth to complement their external protection. The Viking diet itself played a role in cold weather survival. High in animal fats and proteins, it provided the caloric density needed to maintain body heat in cold environments. Archaeological analysis of Viking settlements shows evidence of food preservation techniques, smoking, drying, fermentation, that allowed for nutritionally dense provisions during long voyages. The famous Viking blood sausage, mentioned in several sagas, was likely a high-energy food designed specifically for maritime journeys, where maintaining caloric intake was essential for survival. The Viking adaptation to cold and wet conditions must also be understood within the context of their physiology and diet. Historical and genetic evidence suggests the Norse peoples had physiological adaptations to cold environments, including efficient heat production and distribution within the body. Their high-protein, high-fat diet, heavily featuring fish oils rich in omega-3 fatty acids, would have supported their body's ability to generate internal heat. Evidence from the sagas and archaeological findings suggests that Vikings also used specific preparatory techniques before embarking on sea voyages. One practice involved gradually acclimating to cold conditions, a form of cold training that modern science has confirmed increases the body's efficiency at maintaining core temperature in challenging environments. The Norse also understood the value of physical conditioning for cold tolerance. The sagas describe young men swimming in cold waters as part of their training, a practice that modern science confirms can induce physiological adaptations that improve cold resistance. Studies of modern cold water swimmers have documented increased metabolic efficiency and altered blood flow patterns that enhance survival in cold conditions. The Vikings' intentional cold exposure training would have developed similar adaptations, complementing their technological solutions. The practical knowledge of weather protection wasn't considered secret, it was fundamental cultural knowledge passed down through generations. Norse society valued practical skills, with young people learning these essential techniques through direct observation and participation. This integrated approach to education ensured that knowledge crucial for survival wasn't lost between generations. As Viking expansion reached its height in the 9th and 10th centuries, their weather protection technologies evolved to meet new challenges. Voyages to Iceland, Greenland, and eventually North America exposed Norse mariners to increasingly harsh conditions. Archaeological evidence from these frontier settlements shows adaptations of traditional techniques, incorporating new materials and approaches borrowed from indigenous peoples they encountered. The settlement of Iceland around 870 CE presented new challenges and opportunities for Norse weather protection systems. The abundant sheep pastures allowed for expanded wool production, while volcanic activity provided natural hot springs for wool processing. Icelandic sagas contain detailed descriptions of textile production, indicating its central role in the settlement's economy. Archaeological excavations at sites like Stung have uncovered well-preserved textile tools, confirming the importance of this industry. The Norse who settled in Greenland adopted elements of Inuit clothing design, particularly their use of furs and specific seaming techniques that prevented wind penetration. This cultural exchange represented a practical adaptation rather than an abandonment of their traditional knowledge, a hallmark of Viking pragmatism. Archaeological excavations at Norse Greenland settlements have revealed fascinating evidence of this cultural adaptation. Needle cases and sewing implements found at these sites show a blend of Norse and Inuit designs, suggesting technological exchange. Analysis of textile fragments indicates the adoption of Inuit-style layering techniques that maximized insulation while minimizing bulk, crucial for maintaining mobility in extreme cold. The Norse experience in Greenland also highlights another aspect of their approach to environmental challenges, the willingness to adapt social practices to accommodate environmental realities. Evidence suggests that maritime activities in Greenland followed seasonal patterns different from those in Scandinavia, with hunting expeditions timed to coincide with optimal weather and ice conditions. This flexibility in social organization was as important as their material technologies in enabling survival in harsh environments. By the time Leif Erikson and other Norse explorers reached North America around the year 1000, the Vikings had developed what was arguably the most sophisticated cold-weather maritime technology in the medieval world. This technological advantage, combined with their shipbuilding expertise, allowed them to establish temporary settlements in regions where other Europeans wouldn't venture for centuries. The Lons Aux Meadows site in Newfoundland offers tantalizing glimpses of how Norse mariners adapted their weather protection systems for North American conditions. Excavations have uncovered evidence of textile production alongside typical Norse artifacts, suggesting that maintaining their clothing systems remained a priority even in this distant outpost. The site's location, with good access to marine resources, would have provided materials for waterproofing treatments, allowing the maintenance of traditional weather protection even thousands of miles from their homeland. The Viking approach to cold and wet conditions has parallels in other northern maritime cultures. The Sami people of northern Scandinavia developed similar technologies, particularly in their use of reindeer fat as a waterproofing agent. Trading contacts between Norse and Sami communities likely facilitated exchange of these practical innovations. Archaeological evidence from Viking trading centers shows Sami artifacts alongside Norse goods, suggesting regular interaction and potential technological exchange between these northern peoples. As the Viking Age drew to a close in the 11th century, their practical knowledge of cold weather survival began to spread throughout Europe. Trading centers like Hedeby and later Hansa ports became transmission points for these technologies. Medieval manuscripts from the 12th century onward increasingly mention specific waterproofing techniques that bear striking similarities to those used by the earlier Norse mariners. The waning of the Viking Age didn't mark the end of their weather protection technologies. Norse settlements in the North Atlantic continued to refine these systems, developing regional variations that reflected local conditions and available resources. In Iceland, the production of vadmal became so central to the economy that it served as a standard of value in medieval Icelandic law codes. Archaeological evidence from later medieval sites shows continued use of traditional waterproofing methods alongside newer technologies introduced through expanded European trade networks. The maritime traditions established during the Viking Age also influenced later European exploration. When Portuguese, Spanish, and later English and Dutch mariners began their own age of exploration, they encountered many of the same environmental challenges that the Vikings had solved centuries earlier. Maritime historians have noted similarities between Viking weather protection systems and those adopted by later European explorers, suggesting that Norse innovations may have influenced European maritime culture more broadly than is often recognized. The legacy of Viking weather protection extends into modern times. The principles they developed, layering, natural water-resistant materials, and specialized treatments, form the foundation of modern outdoor clothing design. The wool they favored has experienced a renaissance in modern performance clothing, with manufacturers rediscovering the benefits of lanolin-rich wools for outdoor activities. Modern outdoor clothing companies have increasingly turned to traditional materials and techniques as alternatives to synthetic options. Wool's natural temperature-regulating properties, breathability, and insulating capacity, even when wet, have led to its resurgence in performance clothing. The principle of layering, central to Viking weather protection, remains the cornerstone of modern cold-weather clothing systems. Even the use of natural oils and waxes has seen revival, with products like waxed cotton providing environmentally friendly alternatives to synthetic waterproofing. Perhaps more significant than the specific techniques is the Viking approach to environmental challenges. Rather than seeing the harsh northern climate as an insurmountable obstacle, they developed innovations that transformed these challenges into opportunities for expansion. This adaptive mindset allowed a relatively small population from the northern edges of Europe to exert an influence far beyond their numbers. The Norse saga literature contains numerous references to the relationship between proper preparation and successful voyages. The saga of Eric the Red describes how careful attention to provisions and equipment enabled the Greenland settlement voyages to succeed where others had failed. The saga of the Greenlanders similarly emphasizes practical preparation as central to maritime success. These cultural narratives reinforce the importance of weather protection knowledge, ensuring its transmission across generations. Archaeological evidence continues to enrich our understanding of Viking maritime technologies. Recent excavations at sites like Avaldsnes in Norway have uncovered new evidence of specialized maritime equipment, including what appears to be specialized seafaring garments with unique construction techniques. Advances in analytical methods allow researchers to identify trace compounds in archaeological textiles, revealing waterproofing treatments invisible to earlier generations of archaeologists. Experimental archaeology has also contributed significantly to our understanding of Viking weather protection. Projects like the Viking Ship Museum's Sea Voyages in reconstructed longships have provided practical insights into the effectiveness of traditional Norse maritime technologies. Participants in these voyages report that properly prepared wool garments treated with traditional waterproofing agents perform remarkably well, even in challenging North Sea conditions, confirming the sophistication of Viking solutions. The story of how Vikings stayed dry and warm reveals something profound about their culture, a practical ingenuity rooted in close observation of natural materials and processes. Their solutions weren't based on dominating nature, but on working within its constraints and harnessing its properties. This approach allowed them to venture into the unknown, secure in their ability to meet whatever challenges the harsh northern seas might present. Today, as we grapple with our own environmental challenges, there may be wisdom to be found in this ancient Norse approach, an understanding that true innovation often comes not from fighting against natural forces, but from learning to work harmoniously with them. The Vikings conquered the cold not through brute force, but through generations of accumulated knowledge and respect for the materials their environment provided. As we look out across those same northern seas they once sailed, we might appreciate that beyond their reputation as warriors and raiders, the Vikings were master survivors, people who transformed the harshest conditions into the foundation of an expansive maritime culture that changed the course of European history. Their legacy lives on not just in our historical imagination, but in the practical wisdom they developed for thriving in a world where survival itself was never guaranteed. In the end, the story of Viking weather protection is not merely a tale of technological innovation, but of human ingenuity and adaptability in the face of environmental extremes. It demonstrates how careful observation, practical experimentation, and intergenerational knowledge transfer can produce sophisticated solutions using locally available materials. As modern society rediscovers the value of sustainable, natural materials, the ancient wisdom of the Norse seafarers offers both practical insights and philosophical inspiration, a reminder that sometimes the most effective innovations arise not from conquest of nature, but from deeper understanding of its properties and processes.